Education of a Coroner Review. I read this book privately last year and was surprised how much I came to enjoy it. I expected it to only be okay, but the prologue got me hooked instantly. Seriously. I wasn't sure what the format of the book was going to be, but at first it seemed like it was going to be about separate cases, like the show Forensic Files. Then I thought it was going to be about the coroner's life, Ken Holmes, like a biography. Though from the cover, I first thought that it would just be about the things coroners are supposed to learn at school. In a way, the book is all of these. Of course, there had to be the obligatory childhood part, though as the book went on, it delved into various cases that Coroner Holmes went over, though the central theme was centered around Marin County, and the end focused more on the suicides at the Golden Gate Bridge. Overall, the book was very informative. I learned many things about the mortuary arts that I hadn't heard elsewhere. I had no idea that, at least in California, there were so many different departments that took over the mortuary duties. And at least at the time that Coroner Holmes was employed, he didn't even have to go to school to become the eventual coroner. Granted, his boss was the medical examiner that would perform the autopsies. The general concept of not having a standard structure across the state surprised me. In general, I was surprised that there were so many semantics over who did what and what was regulated by who. One thing I really enjoyed about the book overall was its various vignettes over who died and Holmes's discoveries with them. There are a lot of cases mentioned in this book that I want to go over later on my channel, both popular and unknown. Some of the ones that really stuck out to me were Carol Filippelli's death, which was rather unsolved, and the famous case of Marlene Olive and Chuck Riley. There were other cases that I had never heard of before, such as the mini Charles Manson-esque cult, the murder of Elvin Bishop's daughter, and the German man that spent lots of money, was well liked by the people who met him, and then committed suicide by jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. I enjoyed reading about these cases and really liked actually how they were in chronological order of the position that Holmes was in his job at the time. There are problems in the book, though, with random grammar errors that were overlooked somehow. Then there were certain positioning or wording of sentences that just didn't make sense to me. I don't know if it's because the author is from a different age, but there were a few times I'd look at a sentence and think, what? But I just have to move on because I couldn't make any sense of it. Overall, the writing is good. Looking back, there really weren't any times that I'd have to say that the book dragged on. I do wish the start of the book was about murder, while the end of the book became about suicides at the bridge. Now, I am aware Holmes may have just not had that many to talk about in the beginning of his career, but I wasn't too big of the subject change. I kind of felt like, why not just talk about that from the start? I don't have a problem about the bridge's allure to those thinking of killing themselves. It's just that the book ends with sort of being a call to action about the amount of people who have jumped, the county's lack of putting up barriers, and how eventually Holmes and the author met because of this. This isn't bad, nor does it feel like a separate book, but frankly, I kind of just don't really like how it was put together. I don't read ahead in books, so I never know what the later parts are about. So in this instance, it kind of just came out of nowhere to me. Yet I can't complain too much, because when talking about these things, there was information that pretty much shocked me. At the time of the book's publishing in 2017, I don't believe there were any barriers constructed at the bridge yet, though in 2022 there were. What was most interesting to me about the subject of people jumping is that there were advocates wanting a barrier for years, and yet the local government did nothing. I think that the psychology of morbid curiosity was lightly touched on in this part of the book, though it is enough for me to want to search up more information elsewhere. Ironically, this is a subject that I saw a video for not too long ago, at least when I wrote down the review, where Ask a Mortician talked about the hideous and really weird looking pine cone thing in New York that has no barriers, and as far as I know, still doesn't have any. At least the last time I checked in 2022, and I still think it's that way in 2023. And that is thanks, though, to the developers. Despite the fact that people have jumped off of that cone thing, there is no physical barrier preventing this. As far as I know, the place is just closed off to the public. Such a waste of resources. It was sad, later in the book, when Holmes's job was phased out, but it was his own fault for trying to teach a lesson to a Karen. I don't think it was fair that Holmes risked his entire department's existence because a Karen insisted that he put down she was some person's mother and not their grandmother. To me, it's just not right that he would risk all these people's livelihoods because he was trying to prove a point. How easy is it to fight someone on semantics when you can just retire anyways, though your coworkers would have to search for new jobs? It was so stupid to me, and really not surprising that Holmes's job ended up being absorbed by the police department after he left. There were various points in the story when I didn't agree with Holmes's decision on cases, such as not telling family members details about their loved ones' deaths because it was too graphic. But those people died and were never coming back. If there are details in any way, I believe that it is the family's right to know what happened to their loved ones. But I guess he was just a product of his time, I suppose, as many of these cases are from the 70s and 80s, where it seems like a lot of boomers felt that it wasn't necessary to accommodate families of the murdered, missing, or mysteriously deceased in any way. This isn't a particularly long book, about the average size of 320-ish pages. The material is overall very interesting, and you'll breeze by the content because it is very captivating. I imagine that this would be right up any true crime lover's alley, not just from the information you might have never heard before, but from the vignettes themselves. Despite my misgivings on the story, I would actually recommend this book to readers. It's a 4 out of 5 for me, and I think that anyone who comes across this book will actually enjoy it too.